Today, we wish to discuss something about Hindu way of life, rather Hindu view of life or Hindu outlook towards life. Basically, it means what is the philosophy of life for the Hindus? Now, before we get deeper into it, let's discuss one very small thing. It's about life and philosophy of life. As you might be knowing, starting from the smallest worm to, say, the most intelligent and intellectual person of the world, everyone values one's life. Life is extremely valuable for everyone. Everyone values life and no one wants to die. Excepting for pathological cases, no one wants to die. When a person becomes suicidal, when a person becomes mental case, somehow there is some kind of mental sickness. Unless that mental sickness is there, a person doesn't want to die. So, this desire to live, this is inherent in every life form. And whenever materialism takes over, whenever spirituality takes a back seat, civilizations as a whole and persons as individuals, they start giving too much value to life. Life becomes much more important and philosophy of life takes a back seat. But once we look back at history, once we look at the lives of very famous people, those who are really great, we find that for them life was important. Definitely life was important. But philosophy of life was much more important for them. I quite often use the examples of Socrates and of Mahatma Gandhi. And in fact, in my book Carving a Sky, I have mentioned these two lives. And these two are just samples. There are many more lives, where we find that these people focused more on philosophy of life. For them, life itself was much less significant than philosophy of life. For example, Socrates preached truth, values, etc. And it so happened that people of his town were highly dissatisfied with him because he was bringing enlightenment. And it is in the nature of any moribund society. When a society becomes somewhere bound, it becomes very orthodox. It tends to live by what it is and what it has been practicing. It doesn't want to change. For example, India itself. Take the case of India. There are stupid things that we have been practicing. One of them being caste system. We have been living with the caste system for so long that we don't even want to change it, knowing very well that it has no significance left today and it never had any relevance as far as religion and spirituality is concerned. But we won't change. And anybody who speaks against caste system, the powerful people will go after him. It is in the nature of a moribund society. A society that's closed, it doesn't like enlightenment. Something like that happened in Athens. Our Socrates was there and he was preaching the young the ways to enlightenment, and the elders of the society, they were not happy with Socrates. And so finally they decided that since Socrates has been ruining the heads of the young, he should be put to death. And he was imprisoned and he was given the punishment that on such and such day he will be given the goblet of poison, hemlock, it was known. And Socrates, the chief disciple of Socrates was Plato. And Plato had his influence and he was pretty rich. He, along with some of his friends, made a plan to take Socrates out of the prison, that great escape. So finally they succeeded in reaching Socrates and told him of the plan, that the plan for escape has been made. And Socrates just laughed the idea away. He said that, look, I have lived with these values. Do not expect me to give up my values, my philosophy, simply because of my life. He was not ready to make a compromise. And ultimately when hemlock was given, he just accepted it, drank and finished. You know, something similar we had very powerfully in Gandhiji's life. Gandhiji lived with the values of truth and non-violence. And whenever he was sitting on satyagraha, non-cooperation, if police arrested him, he got arrested. If police beat him up, he got beaten up. Without raising his hands even in self-defense. Now these are the people for whom philosophy of life is much more important than life itself. Now here we are not discussing cases of say Jesus or case of Buddha or Sri Ramakrishna. Because for them there is no philosophy of life. For them it's realization. For them it is truth. For Buddha, the enlightenment is a truth. For Sri Ramakrishna, God is truth. For Jesus, God is truth. For them it's not philosophy of life. Philosophy of life comes for people who are a little lower than that, who are not yet into spiritual realization. So, persons like us, we need a philosophy of life based on which we would be leading our lives, hoping that someday we will also become perfect. Philosophy of life is needed for people who are striving to be better, who are striving to be perfect. See, quite often I hear people say that, well, we are sure of this life only. We need to live. We need to enjoy. There is nothing after this life. What is there after this life? Perfect. But that is something that even an animal knows. There is a cow, there is a chicken. Let's think of a chicken. It is aware of his body. And when somebody is trying to cut it, it is trying to run away. Because it is sure of only one thing, its own existence, its own life, its own world. It knows its small world and it is trying to protect itself. Because it knows that there is nothing once it is dead. That nothing is there for me. Once I go to sleep, the world vanishes for me. And as far as I can imagine, as far as I can conclude, I know that once I am dead, nothing else will remain. Nothing will remain. Why do you need learning after that? I mean, why do you need a philosophy? Sometimes when I hear of materialism or scientific materialism and these big words like that, I wonder, why do I have to know that I am body? This is something I know from my birth. Why do I have to learn books to know that everything ends with death? That is something too obvious for me. When they say that there is that Big Bang and due to scientific determinism, one thing gives birth to the other, another thing gives birth to the other, and then we are a product of matter, and my whole body, mind, ego, it is a complex of matter. Now why do I need to read books on that? It's something too obvious for me. I am there and this world is there, and I am real and this world is real, and once I am gone, nothing remains. Why do I need books to read? Books will be read to know things I don't know. Whether they are true or not true, whether telling facts or not facts, that is an entirely different topic. That we shall discuss. As we continue with our talks, we will be discussing more of that. But the first thing is, why read the obvious? For example, let's take the case of story. The larger books which narrate these kind of stories are known as novel. Novel means novelty. It has to be something new. There has to be something new. Once I was telling a friend of mine that, there was a time when stories regarding Brahmins will invariably start with, there was a foolish Brahmin or there was a greedy Brahmin. Reason being, if you say that the Brahmin was learned, it's something obvious. It doesn't make a story. To make a story, you have to say something which is not obvious. If you begin with a story that you entered a restaurant and waiter came and he took orders and supplied food, and then you came out of the restaurant and then you slowly walk towards the railway station and you continue with that. Who is going to read your story? It's something obvious. This is something everyone experiences. The moment you say that I entered a hotel, a restaurant, and I found a dead body lying before me, right, that makes a story. Because that's something that doesn't happen. Now it makes a story. Basically it means that unless there is something new, unless there is something to be told which you do not know already, it neither makes a good book, nor it makes a good story, nor it makes a good movie, it makes nothing. You know, small kids are small in fact, but kids, they love going to their grandparents to hear stories. And every time they go sit with them, sit in their laps, and they'll say that, tell us stories. And if the grandfather, he continues telling one of his exploits again and again, so maybe 20 times, 30 times, and then he gets bored. And every time grandfather calls him, he runs away. Because he knows that he has heard the same story many times. He wants something new, something that he doesn't know. It's not only about novelty, it's not about newness. It is about something that he doesn't know. When we read books, particularly when we read books by the masters, the sages and the philosophers, it automatically implies that I will be reading something new. I won't be reading something obvious. So, philosophy of life implies that it would be teaching us something which is not very obvious to me. Now, when we look back at life, we find that there are great people who have lived by philosophy of life, and most people live only for their life. They just live. But when you look back to say at least 100 years ago, all over the world, you go to more or less any country where there was some kind of learning, there was some kind of enlightenment, you would find that their life revolved around religion, if not spirituality. You go to any country, you go to England, you go to America, you go to Europe, you come to India, you go to Arab countries, you will find that the life revolved around religion. People got up in the morning, they performed some kind of rituals, they offered some kind of prayers, and then at the time of food and all, they would offer those food to God, in the memory of God and things like that. And in the evenings, they would sit down and do some prayers and things like that, and then they would sleep. And if something wrong happened with their life, they would think that God had given and God has taken away. So God was the center of life. You may question their rationality, you may question their irrationality, you may think that they were fools, you may say whatever you want, but the fact remains that all over the world there was a way of life in which religion mattered much more than materialism. And then came the Enlightenment, so-called Enlightenment, and in Europe, it is said that when the Protestant religion came, Martin Luther, he introduced Protestant branch of Christianity, sect, you cannot branch sect. So after that there was some kind of enlightenment. But then with enlightenment came lots of wrong things. So although Christianity is split into two parts, and then both the sects were trying to overpower each other, somehow so-called rationality took over. And when that rationality was replaced by materialism, nobody realized. And entered science. And with science came science temper. With science temper came advantages offered by technology. Because see, science and technology, these are two different things. Science is pure knowledge, technology is its application. And once the technology came, people got overawed by technology. So we had now electrical lights, and we had fans, and we had ACs, and we had aeroplanes and trains. Life became much more comfortable, and exploitation increased. And the moment this kind of technology entered, this kind of comfort entered, there was no room for others. Because whenever there is comfort, whenever importance comes on life, it is me first. It has to be. Because when God is important for any community, whatever society, whatever community, when God is important, then God's children too are important. But in materialism, I am important, others are not important. So we find that earlier we found that there was a closed group that found importance. So supposing here is a person, he has a small family, he tries to look after the interests of his family without caring for others. And slowly we are finding that family value is also going away now. Husband and wife, everyone is living for oneself. As a consequence, divorce is as common as anything else. It has to be. Because now you say that you are important. Somewhere, rationality, materialism, selfishness, self-centeredness, and ultimately destruction, they are all somewhere related. Although we don't realize it, somewhere they are related. Now, so we ultimately find that there are two ways of life as understood commonly. One is where God is at the center of existence, and second is where selfishness, I don't say I, because even when God is at the center of existence, I remains. I-ness remains. But here it is selfishness, self-centeredness. It becomes pure matter where people think that everything ends once I am dead. So, but at deeper level if you look, and when we look at the words of Swami Vivekananda, and when we think ourselves with little compassion, we realize that these two ways of life, where there is God, there is spirituality, there is that spiritual reality, and there is also the reality of the world, which is dictated by so-called rationality, or you can say scientific temper, or you can say materialism, whatever you say. Apparently, there is a massive difference between spirituality and the world, or materialism. But this concept again has come from the Western world itself. There was a famous philosopher Descartes. He brought the concept of division, that x-axis and y-axis, where he said that these two are incompatible. But no, they are not. Because if you look back at the Hindu way of life, say 2000 years ago, we had kings who were intensely religious, and yet they were fully into enjoying life. No wonder India gave birth to books like Kama Sutra and Artha Shastra and things like that. And these were written by people who were intensely religious. Scientific discoveries were made by people who were intensely religious. Even in the ancient Greek civilization, we find that people who were into science, they were religious. They had that religious bent of mind. It was only after the so-called enlightenment, or whatever they say, more or less you can say 16th century Europe, after that things slowly started going wrong. Even Newton, he was a highly religious person, but his counterparts in France, they were not. So somewhere things went wrong. Not wrong, wrong is not the right word. They took diverse paths, and as we stand on the crossroads, we find that somewhere religion and rationality are seen as opposing forces, which they are not. Religion runs on rationality, and rationality needs religion. Without religion, rationality becomes extremely monstrous. So, somewhere I personally feel, particularly because I belong to the Ramakrishna mission, because I have studied Swami Vivekananda, I feel that the future religion will be somewhere fusion of both religion and rationality, where materialism and spiritual values will combine. Maybe we have not yet worked out a system. Maybe Vedanta, as we understand, will in future combine these two things, spirituality, spiritual values, along with the comforts offered by the science. So you can say material comfort, I won't say materialism, material comfort in some form, combined with spiritual values, that will be the future of religion. Now when you look at the way of life as far as Hinduism is concerned, somewhere although not very clearly stated, not very clearly told. But somewhere, the value of these two, intensely spiritual, intensely minded, the term is intensely, and some kind of diluted materialism, you can say. Diluted materialism is the right word. Somewhere where materialism is slightly diluted. Spirituality will not be diluted because diluted spirituality is no spirituality. But materialism can be diluted. So somewhere when you combine intense spirituality with or without diluted materialism, that would be the ideal recipe for the future generation. If the future generation has to be taught religion and spirituality, it has to be taught as a combination of spirituality with diluted materialism. Now, what we are going to discuss right now somewhere shows this approach. The way of life that we are going to discuss is based on Isavasya Upanishad. Isavasya Upanishad. I'll just write in short. Isavasya Upanishad or Isha Upanishad. You might have heard the term Upanishad. Technically, it means to sit near a teacher and listen to spiritual instructions. If you take the root of this word Upanishad, it can also imply that knowledge which takes you towards self-realization. Acharya Shankara, who is considered to be the master commentator, greatest commentator of the Upanishads, has at various places brought out the meaning of Upanishad in both ways. To sit near the teacher and learn the spiritual matters, and also the knowledge that liberates you from this worldly bondage and takes you towards spirituality. That might give you some kind of feeling that probably these things are not meant for us. No, it's not so. Upanishads are intensely practical. They have to be practical because they deal with you the way you are, as you are, and from here they have to take you higher up. See, quite often it so happens that spiritual truths are taught from high pedestal, and people feel that I can never be like that. When you look at the life of those greats who sacrifice their life for everything, sometimes we wonder, can we really emulate them? Can we be like them? Can I be like Sri Krishna, who was absolutely calm during that Mahabharata war? Not possible. Can I be like Sri Rama, who was about to be made the Yuvraj? He was crown prince and he was sent to the exile for no fault of his, absolute no fault of his, and he took it in a very calm manner. And that very day, rather that very moment, he walked towards exile, towards the forest with his wife and younger brother. Can I really stay that calm? Or when Jesus was crucified, he says that, forgive them, they know not what they are doing. Can I really be that calm? Probably not. This is one serious problem with the masters, because they act as the ideal and we try to be like them, and we are trying to emulate them, and it's not always possible. So sometimes it disheartens us. Sometimes we feel, one of the worst things that can be said to a kid is, why can't you be like that person? And why can he be? Why should he be? Parents sometimes say this to their kid. Let's see, there is your friend, he is a topper. Why can't you be like him? He is so good at this. Why can't you be like him? His manners are so good. Why can't you be like them? Because this boy, this child of yours, he or she is she. He or she cannot be someone else. That person's speciality is different and this person's speciality is different. These two should not be compared in any way, and nor some ideals should be placed before us to be like them. Because everyone is an individual. The growth of every individual has to be strictly on the patterns that he is built upon. There is a mango tree and there is an apple tree. The apple tree and mango tree, they cannot interchange their places. An apple cannot be like a mango and mango cannot be like an apple. Just like that, every individual is different. If we are not able to bring out our potentials, if we are not successful in this society, that does not mean that I have to emulate somebody else. That does not mean that I have to be like somebody else. Because you see, someday it may so happen that the blockage that is there within me, it might get removed. And my powers, all that is within me, the potential that is within me, may get unleashed. And once it gets unleashed, others will be told to be compared with me. Say, why can't you be like this person? Without realizing that the person to whom this is being told, he also has infinite potential. Once that blockage is removed, it's something like there's a fountain of water and a big stone is placed over it. And somehow that stone is removed and the power that is within unleashes. It is actually like that. And we, in Hindu religion, and we those who belong to Vedantic traditions, we believe it fully because that is at the core of Hindu religion. So, when we look at all these things, we know that religions have a tendency to pontificate. Pontificate means they tell you something from a very high pedestal. Buddha was like this and we have to be like this. You can never be like him. And don't worry, nor can Buddha be like you. Never forget that. Even he cannot be like you. Let's take any great master. I am told that be like him. Don't forget that he cannot be like me. But yes, there are some values in him that are extremely appealing and they have an universal appeal. When Christianity came to India and they were talking about Christ being great and Hindus were talking about Krishna being great, how can you compare these two personalities? We are ordinary mortals. We are too ordinary to compare them. Only Krishna can understand Christ and only Christ can understand Krishna. If you have some sensibility, you will understand this. But we don't have sensibility. We go on comparing things. Upanishads, what they do, most of the Upanishads, and there are, some say that there are 108 Upanishads, and some say there are 1008 Upanishads. But we know that Shankaracharya, he has written commentaries on 11 Upanishads and he has quoted from another 4 or 5 Upanishads. So more or less 14, 15 Upanishads, they are more important than others. Not that the others are not authentic, just that these Upanishads are more important. Now, of these Upanishads, Isha Upanishad is considered to be pretty old, very ancient, and it's a very short Upanishad. There are only 18 mantras in it. Mantras means, normally in Sanskrit, whenever verses come, we call them shloka, but the verses of Vedas and Upanishads are known as mantras. There are just 18 mantras, and it is one of the very short Upanishads. Another short Upanishad is Mandukya Upanishad. So Isavasya Upanishad is a very popular Upanishad and very short Upanishad and not very difficult to understand, although there are obscure passages in it. It's so ancient that we find some of the ideas which are pretty old, very old. And second very important thing is that usually the pattern in the Vedas is that those of you who have been hearing these classes on a regular basis, the Vedas have 4 different sections. The first one are used for rituals, sacrifices. The second section, known as Brahman, are used to define those sacrifices, to describe and the rituals associated with them. The third one, known as Aranyak, is meant for contemplation, and the last 4 Upanishads discuss the spiritual truth. Usually, there is a kind of arrangement. But Isavasya Upanishad is a very unusual Upanishad because it comes immediately after the first section. In fact, it forms the last chapter of the first section. First section is known as Mantra. Mantra, the verses that are used in sacrifice. Now, we had discussed in the Vedas talk, there are 4 Upanishads, and one of them, Yajurveda, has 2 different recensions, 2 different kinds of Yajurveda. One is known as Shukla, that is white, and Krishna, the black. Now, these 2 Vedas, they are practiced in different parts of the country, but usually people study both of them. The Shukla Yajurveda, the first 39 chapters, they deal with sacrifices. The 40th chapter is Isavasya Upanishad. Now that's a very unusual thing, and yet this 40th chapter is never used in sacrifice. They are chanted, but not used in sacrifice. Sacrifice means whenever a fire is lit, oblations are put and some mantras are recited. And those mantras are used for different sacrifices. But Isavasya Upanishad, the 40th chapter of Yajurveda, it is never used in sacrifice. And there is something very interesting. And when Shankaracharya comments on that, the first thing he comments that very rightly, this chapter, Isavasya Upanishad, is not used in sacrifice. Because sacrifice means you are sacrificing something to someone. So the duality of reality, the real two, that is me and the person or divine to whom it is being offered, becomes very real. I am there, and the person to whom, or the divine to whom it is being offered, that is real. So the 2 truths, me and that, becomes real. That means I and you, these become real. That is, reality becomes 2, me and the world. By world here we also mean God, we also mean divinities, and gods with small g. That is, I-ness, I am there and there is something in front of me, whether it be world or whether it be God. You know, that way materialism is a pure dualistic system because it accepts the reality of I and it also accepts the reality of the world. When it comes to certain religions that talk of God as God as God. So they also have this problem of duality. They accept that I am there, I am the devotee, and here is God whom I worship. So there is this duality. Now, when you look at Isavasya Upanishad, and for that matter, each and every Upanishad, they break down this dual nature of reality and they come to non-dual nature. Says that reality is one and only one. So, when we look at this Isavasya Upanishad, it discusses the nature of reality. And for it, reality is one undivided consciousness. Reality is absolutely one. It is non-dual. Only it exists. Nothing else exists. It is non-dual. Non-dual means there is no 2. So can you say it is one? No, it is not one. Because the idea of one comes only when there is 2. Is it 0 as Buddhists preach? No, it's not 0 because it is there. It's neither 0, it's not 1, it is not 2. That's why the term uses non-dual. It doesn't say 1 because if you say 1, it becomes monotheism. It becomes one God. The way Christianity or Islam preach or Vaishnavas preach, there is one God. Upanishads do not preach of one reality. It just says that reality is Advaita, non-dual. What is non-dual? That is something intuitive that you have to understand by yourself. Because it is neither 0, it is not 1, nor it is 2. So it says reality is one. But for our convenience we are talking one. This is non-dual. But to reach there, because we ordinary beings, for us, reality is 2. I am true and you are true. I am true and the world is true. I am true and the world is, and God is true. So there has to be this journey from 2 to non-dual, or even if you say 1 for convenience sake, let it be 1. So it's journey from many to 1. In fact, it's for us, reality is not even 2, it's much more than that. because I am true and the world is true and God is true. And I am true, the world is true, God is true, and God's will, call it Maya or in any form, that is also true. That is, the power of God is true. So minimum, for a common man, there are minimum 4 realities, each differing from each other. I am different, world is different. I am different, God's will is different. And God's will is different and God is different. So, it's a total mess of religion. Upanishads cut at the very root of this multiplicity. And it projects the non-dual nature. And if there is that spiritual truth is there, that is philosophy of life is there will have to be ways. Surprisingly, Upanishads prune and organize all the available paths in just 2. The first path is the path of self-realization or self-knowledge. Second path is characterized by action. I'll just go down. So there are clearly 2 paths. First one is the path which is characterized by knowledge. The second path is characterized by action. And here, initially when we were discussing pure spirituality, intense spirituality, and we're talking about diluted materialism. This is intense spirituality, and the second one is diluted materialism. And no Upanishad discusses both these paths in such a less number of verses and so very clearly. So Isavasya Upanishad or Isha Upanishad is a very special Upanishad because it teaches the way of life of the Hindus in brief and in absolutely very clear terms. These ideas we find in every Upanishad but spread out. For example, in Mandukya Upanishad, which is considered to be one of the very difficult Upanishads, it's only about intense spirituality. Of course, we will never come across any Upanishad that discusses only activity. There is no Upanishad that teaches realization or reaching the ultimate spiritual truth through the path of action. But there are Upanishads which discuss both. As we look at the Hindu religion, as we look at the Hindu way of life, when we study Hinduism in totality, we find that the way of life, as Hindus see it, can be very clearly divided into 2 or categorized into 2. The first one is the path of knowledge taken by the monks. And the path of knowledge demands that you give up everything. There is a complete renunciation. The second path is you say that I still want to enjoy the world and I want to grow spiritually too. And this second path is characterized by activity. These 2 paths are beautifully put in the first 2 mantras of Isavasya Upanishad, very beautifully. First one is Isavasyam Vidam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Kasyasvid Dhanam. Says, give up everything for the Lord. Give up everything for the Lord. God alone is true. Atman alone is true. Everything else is just play of name and form. Realize this and stop being greedy. Check your avarice. Control your greed. Control everything. Control yourself. And slowly try to see the presence of God in everything. Try to feel that Atman alone exists. Try to feel that all the multiplicity that you are seeing, it is just play of name and form. It's like ocean and the waves. Ocean alone is true. Waves are only the name and form. They are transient, they are temporary, they are not important. But a person will say that, no, I can't give up everything. I still have desire. I want to enjoy the world. I want to live long. I want my friends and family around. Then it says, fine, take up the path of activity, but stay unselfish, stay detached. Kurvanneveha karmani jijivishechatam sama. Evam tvai nanyat hetosti na karma lipyate nare. Be active. Be fully active. But stay detached. Detachment means to be unselfish. So these are the two paths. The first one is where you see Atman alone exists or God alone exists. God alone has become everything. Or is the pure consciousness. It's like ocean of consciousness on which there is this play of the waves which are name and form. And the second verse says, if you can't do that, if you are not good enough at that, then work intensely. Work with zeal. Go out and conquer the world, but be unselfish. We will discuss these two mantras in a little more detail because they form the foundation of Hindu religion, Hindu way of life, and you can say the very outlook. What Hinduism stands for is best described in these two mantras of Isavasya Upanishad. We will continue with this series of talk and maybe in the next class because our time is up, and we will begin exactly from this implication of these two mantras and wider ramifications, because these are not just mere mantras which you can read in translation and understand. They have very deep connotations. Their implications are continue to reverberate in the Hindu society even today. And I had read somewhere, I don't remember, Gandhiji had very famously said that if all the other spiritual truths of the Hindus or maybe of other religions are removed and only these two mantras are kept, all the religions can come up with the help of these two mantras. This we will discuss in the next talk.